The night was cold, the kind that made the streets even crueler. Under the dim glow of broken streetlights, Susan sat on the sidewalk, wrapped in a thin, tattered blanket. She hugged her knees to her chest, staring at the busy road where expensive cars speed fast without a second glance. She had been on the street for almost a year now, surviving on scraps and the occasional kindness of strangers. Life had never been easy, but she had learned to fight to survive. That night, however, something unusual happened. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up across the street. The driver stepped out, walked to the back door and opened it. A man emerged. The billionaire, the ruthless businessman, the man whose name commanded fear and respect in the corporate world. Susan has seen his face on the covers of magazines, in newspaper articles, displayed in shop windows. But what was he doing here at this hour, staring directly at her? He walked towards her with slow, deliberate steps, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of presence that made the air around him feel heavier. Susan's heart pounded. Rich men didn't stop for people like her. When he finally stopped in front of her, his sharp blue eyes studied her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Come with me." Susan blinked. "What?" She glanced around, thinking he must be speaking to someone else, but there was no one. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Gary's gaze remained fixed on her. "I have an offer for you." Susan's stomach twisted. She had heard stories of rich men picking up poor girls, using them, and discarding them like trash. She had survived this long by avoiding situations like this. "I am not interested," she said, gripping her blanket tighter. Garry tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "You haven't even heard my offer." Susan shook her head. "I don't need to. I am fine here." His jaw tightened. He reached into the pocket, pulled out a check, and dropped it in front of her. £5,000. Susan's breath hitched. That amount of money was more than she had ever held in her entire life. Her fingers twitched, tempted to pick it up, but she forced herself to look away. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice unsteady. Gary's next word made her blood run cold. "I want you to bear my child." Susan stared at him, thinking she had misheard. Bear his child? Was it some kind of joke? "What kind of sick offer is that?" she snapped. Garry remained calm. "I need an heir, someone to continue my bloodline." Susan paused, wrist. This wasn't just some random rich man looking for company. He was serious. "Why me?" she asked, her voice shaky. His expression remained unreadable. "Because you have nothing to lose." The words hit like a slap. He was right. She had nothing. No family, no home, no future. But to carry a child for a man like him. Garry reached into his pocket and pulled out another check. £25,000. Susan swallowed hard. "You will live in my house," he continued. "You will have everything you need. but once this child is born, you will leave. Her stomach twisted. And if I refuse? His face remained cold. Then you will continue sleeping on the streets, hoping to find food tomorrow. Susan clenched her fist. This wasn't just an offer, it was a trap. But what choice did she have? Her hands trembled as she picked up the check. I need time to think. Garry's gaze darkened. You have 5 minutes. Susan sat in the Rolls Royce, her heart hammering. She had agreed. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was survival, but she had made the deal. Garry sat beside her, completely silent. The car smelled of leather and something else. Power control. Minutes later, they arrived at his mansion. It was massive, more like a palace than a home. The gates opened automatically and the car rolled into the compound, stopping in front of the grand entrance. A woman in a fitted black suit opened the door for Susan. "Follow me," she said in a clipped tone. Susan hesitated but stepped out, her feet sticking into the perfect pavement drive away. Inside, the mansion was breathtaking. Gold chandeliers, marble floors, walls lined with priceless art. Every inch of it screamed wealth. Yet something felt off. The house was too quiet, too controlled, like a place where emotions had been erased. "You will stay here," the woman said, leading her to a large, elegant bedroom. "Mr. Garry has given strict instructions. Do not leave your room without permission." Susan nodded slowly. As the woman left, the door closed behind with a click. Susan turned, her pulse still raising. She was in a gold cage like this, and deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Susan lay awake in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling. The mattress was soft. The sheets smelled of fresh lavender, and yet she couldn't sleep. She was trapped, not by chains, but by contracts, by a decision she wasn't sure she could undo. She turned the side, her eyes catching the locked door. Why did it feel like a prison? A soft knock startled her. She froze. "Knock, knock." Susan hesitated, then walked cautiously towards the door. "Who is it?" she whispered. Silence. Then a faint voice. "Be careful." Her blood ran cold. She yanked the door open, but the hallway was empty. A chill crawled up her spine. Who had whispered those words and why? The next morning, Susan was laid downstairs to have a breakfast with Garry. He sat at the long dining table, flipping through the newspaper as if he hasn't just bought a stranger to carry his child. "Did you sleep well?" he asked without looking up. Susan hesitated. Not really. He finally glanced at her, his blue eyes sharp. "Why?" She debated telling him about the whister, but she decided against it. "Just everything feels unfamiliar." He nodded as if he expected that. "You will get used to it," she doubted. As she ate, she noticed a long hallway to the left, darker than the rest of the house, unlike the other beautiful decorated parts of the mansion. That hallway looked abandoned. Something about it felt wrong. She glanced at Garry. "What's down there?" He didn't even blink. "You don't need to know." A cold wave, unease, washed over her. That night, Susan couldn't stop thinking about the forbidden hallway. She wasn't allowed to leave her room. but curiosity gnawed at her. She had to know. Taking slow, careful steps, she slipped out of her room and tiptoed down the corridor. The mansion was eerily quiet, the shadows stretching like vat fingers along the walls. She reached the hallway. The air was colder here, heavy. Then she noticed a dark, slightly ajar. Her heart pounded. She pushed it open. Inside was a room filled with pictures, photos of women, their faces blurred, their names crossed out in red ink. Susan's stomach twisted. What was this? A shuffling noise made her spin around, and she screamed. Garry stood in the doorway, his expression readable. You shouldn't be here. Susan's breath hitched. His voice wasn't angry. It was a warning. Hello my beautiful besties. This is just the beginning of this story. Kindly stay tuned for the part 2. Bye. Kindly subscribe, like, share so that the algorithm of this story can go viral. I love you all.